Theodore Roosevelt, America's 26th president, served from 1901 until 1909. At 42, he was the youngest man ever to become president after William McKinley was assassinated in September of 1901. Roosevelt, who millions affectionately called Teddy, or TR, quickly won wide popularity and was easily elected to a full term in 1904. But even his grand accomplishments and great popularity couldn't secure him a third term in the White House. Hi, I'm Kendel Sarna at the Theodore Roosevelt Museum in Oyster Bay, New York. Theodore Roosevelt was born in New York City on October 27, 1858. He was the second of the 4 children of Theodore and Martha Bullock Roosevelt, whose ancestors came to America from Holland in the 1640s. Like his father, young Teddy had great energy, curiosity, and determination. Although he suffered from asthma, he enjoyed an active childhood. He was nearsighted and wore glasses, yet he loved both books and the outdoors. When he was 10, and again when he was 14, Theodore went with his family on year-long trips abroad, visiting Europe and the Middle East. He studied under tutors until he entered Harvard University in 1876 at the age of 18. He earned good grades in college and graduated from Harvard in 1880. In October 1879, Roosevelt met Alice Hathaway Lee, the daughter of a wealthy Boston investment banker, and they were married on his 22nd birthday. Roosevelt's introduction to politics came in the fall of 1881, at the age of 23, when he won election to the New York State Assembly. He was re-elected twice, in 1882 and 1883. But a double tragedy struck the future president on February 14, 1884. His wife, Alice, died 2 days after the birth of their daughter, and on the same day, Roosevelt's mother died of typhoid fever. He briefly left politics after that to become a cowboy on the Little Missouri River in the Dakota Territory. The hard life of 16-hour days in the saddle helped him forget his tragedy and develop his love of nature and the outdoors. He returned to New York City in 1886, and at the request of Republican leaders, ran for mayor. He was badly defeated. Then, on December 2, 1886, he remarried to a childhood friend, Edith Kermit Carew. Eventually, they would raise 6 children at this house, which he called Sagamore Hill, on New York's Long Island. Teddy Roosevelt entered national politics when President Benjamin Harrison appointed him to the Civil Service Commission in 1889. In 1895, he gladly accepted the post of president of the Board of Police Commissioners in New York City, where he fought to stamp out dishonesty on the police force. The next year, President William McKinley made him an assistant secretary of the Navy. While serving in the Navy Department, the U.S. battleship Maine was blown up by the Spanish in Havana Harbor in Cuba. The United States retaliated by declaring war on Spain. Roosevelt immediately recruited a cavalry regiment to run the Spanish out of Cuba. His volunteers were former college athletes and Western cowboys who became famous as the Rough Riders. Following his return from Cuba in 1898, he ran for governor of New York and won. As governor, Roosevelt was an efficient, independent administrator who lived by the motto, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." When the Republican National Convention of 1900 drew near, Roosevelt consented to be President William McKinley's vice presidential running mate. In the election, McKinley and Roosevelt defeated their Democratic opponents, William Jennings Bryan and former Vice President Adlai E. Stevenson. But only 6 months later, President McKinley was shot and killed by an assassin. Roosevelt took the oath of office as America's 26th president on September 14, 1901, just 6 weeks before his 43rd birthday. He was the youngest man ever to become president. Roosevelt kept all of McKinley's cabinet members and vowed to continue his policies. But Teddy Roosevelt was too independent to follow in another man's footsteps. Business leaders feared him, and they were right to, because when he was New York's governor, he sought stricter government control over industry. As president, he gained a reputation as a Trustbuster for breaking up large business monopolies. These trusts had increased productivity and raised the standard of living, but prices had also risen, and people blamed the trusts. Roosevelt filed suits against 44 corporations, and among others, ended John D. Rockefeller's Oil Trust and James B. Duke's Tobacco Trust. But he wanted his administration to act justly towards labor unions as well. So, in May of 1902, when about 140,000 members of the United Mine Workers went on strike, he proposed that their differences be settled by arbitration. He had no legal authority to do it, but he threatened to seize and operate the mines unless they reached a compromise. Many of his critics consider these policies dangerously progressive, even socialistic. In foreign affairs, Roosevelt believed that the government needed to use a big stick, meaning threat of force, to carry out its foreign policies. Between 1902 and 1905, he persuaded Congress to approve building 10 battleships and 4 armored cruisers for the Navy. He called these ships the Great White Fleet and sent them around the world without Congress's approval, to warn European powers to stay out of the Western Hemisphere. Because America's new Navy would need to shift rapidly between the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans, Roosevelt negotiated with Colombia for the right to build a canal across Central America. The Panama Canal was begun in 1905 as thousands of laborers worked with steam shovels and dredges to cut through jungles, hills, and swamps to create a shortcut between the two oceans. At a cost of $380 million, it ranked as one of the greatest engineering achievements in the world, and shortened a ship's voyage between the oceans by more than half. Roosevelt visited the Panama Canal in 1906, the first president to travel to a foreign country while in office. He said he was prouder of the canal than of any other accomplishment of his administration. Life in Teddy Roosevelt's White House was never dull. His children and their friends became known as the White House Gang. The president often played tennis on the White House lawn and went horseback riding and hiking with a group of friends known as his tennis cabinet. The First Lady, Edith Roosevelt, was an efficient and gracious White House hostess who carefully kept out of politics. In 1904, the Republicans unanimously nominated Roosevelt for president at their national convention. With Senator Charles W. Fairbanks of Indiana as vice president, Roosevelt called on the voters to continue his square deal policies. The Democratic nominees were no match for him. Roosevelt won the election by more than 2.5 million popular votes. No earlier president had ever won by so large a margin. He would go on during his first full term to start the conservation movement by adding about 150 million acres to national forests, and establishing the Forest Service. He also set up 5 new national parks, 25 irrigation or reclamation projects, set aside 18 sites as national monuments, and established the first 4 national game preserves. But domestic problems dogged his second administration. In 1906, Congress passed the Hepburn Railway Rate Act to help control the railroad monopoly. Also in 1906, Congress passed the Meat Inspection Act and the Food and Drugs Act to clean up the food industry. And in 1907, the stock market slumped. Businessmen blamed Roosevelt and his progressive legislation policies. After his second term in office, Roosevelt declared under no circumstances would he run for president again. Instead, in 1908, he selected his Secretary of War, William Howard Taft, to succeed him. Taft won easily over the Democratic candidate, William Jennings Bryan. After leaving the presidency, Roosevelt sailed to Africa to hunt big game. He and his party brought down 296 animals, including 9 lions. But TR wouldn't stay out of politics for long. When he returned from Africa, he discovered his successor had split the Republican Party. Progressive Republican leaders turned to Roosevelt to bring them back together. In 1912, he and his followers formed the Progressive, or Bull Moose Party. Roosevelt once again ran for the White House. But it was not to be. His candidacy split the Republican vote. The Democratic candidate, New Jersey Governor Woodrow Wilson, won the election. By 1914, Roosevelt had explored the River of Doubt in the Brazilian jungle, where he contracted a form of jungle fever and returned home, weak and aged. He died unexpectedly of a blood clot in the heart on January 6, 1919, at the age of 61. He's buried in Young's Memorial Cemetery near his museum and home at Sagamore Hill, beside Oyster Bay in New York. His second wife, Edith, is buried beside him. Theodore Roosevelt, the great adventurer and politician, regarded public life as a great stage, and as president, he joyfully took center stage. When he left office, he wrote, "I do not believe that anyone else has ever enjoyed the White House as much as I have." He was probably right.